Some concerning symptoms puts Bill Self in the hospital. Scary news, obviously. We're going to talk about it and try to break it down as best we can on this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's happening? Derek Johnson here, and this is Locked On Jayhawks bonus episode here as Bill Self has been hospitalized. So not fun news there, a bit of a somber show today, but we're going to talk about it, what's going on, what is the latest news. We wanted to get that to you, and I guess what does this mean? Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day, and thank you for making it anywhere you get your podcast, whether it's on YouTube, anywhere that you get your show on the audio side of things. And again, thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show, including our bonus episodes of the show. We're going to break down the news here. It is inevitable that at some point, things need to be talked about as well. Like, what does this mean long term? So we're going to try to do a little bit of that here, even though it feels a little uncomfortable to do that on its own. This probably should just sit as a story, but I guess here we are. So here is the news in case you missed it. This was a release from KU Athletics about Bill Self. They said, Kansas men's basketball coach Bill Self felt unwell and experienced some concerning symptoms on Thursday. He was transported to Lawrence Memorial Hospital, where he had 2 stents inserted. The procedure went very well, and he is expected to make a full recovery. He is in good spirits and expects to be released from the hospital soon. So all that at the end is obviously very well. Procedure went well. He's expected to make full recovery, in good spirits, expected to be released from the hospital soon. Like, that is obviously all good news for Kansas and Bill Self. And of course, this comes a couple of years after the 2023, I don't know what the proper term would be for this situation, whatever, that forced him to miss the rest of the Big 12 tournament, miss the NCAA tournament, where he had some sort of heart issue where he had to go in and I think get a stent done for that specifically. Now, I don't know for sure. Maybe you could connect dots and say, hey, if he had to get a stent for his heart in 2023, maybe you would say, I don't know, does that increase the likelihood that you would just assume that's what it's going to revolve around in 2025. It's not a guarantee, though. You can get stents in a lot of different things throughout your body. You can get it for, something as major as your heart with one of your valves. You can get it for something as major as, like, I think with your brain, like involving like strokes. You can get it for, I don't want to say minor. Anytime you're getting a stent, anytime you're getting something that is involving opening up, what is it, like blood vessels or whatever. Like, obviously that is a very, important. That is a very like scary, I guess, situation for you and your family to be in. But there are other parts that, like, if you have maybe a blood clot, possibly very dangerous situation. Obviously, if you have a blood clot, but the recovery from maybe having a blood clot and then figuring that out and like what your procedure is, what your the things you have to do as an outpatient are going to be a little bit different than if you got a stent done because your heart, something to your heart was blocked, right? So there are different kind of levels of this that we don't entirely know, like, what it all is. And again, the fact that procedure went very well, expected to make full recovery, in good spirits, expected to be released from the hospital. Like, that's all great news for Kansas. That's all great news for Bill Self. That's all great news for his family. And like I said earlier, like, I feel bad even doing this. Like, we should probably just cut the episode here. Like, there's the news. Like, boom, we're moving forward. At the same point in time, I know you come here for analysis. I know you might be listening to, okay, what does this exactly mean? And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if I wait to talk about what does this mean for a week, is that okay? But it's not okay right now? Or is this a situation where it's like when is the right time, right, to talk about it? Because at some point we do have to talk about, what does this mean? Does it, handicap how long his coaching career could be at Kansas? Like, where does KU kind of go from here? So I do want to at least touch on that stuff while trying to be as sensitive to the situation as possible, and understanding that the most important thing here is that Bill Self is healthy for him, for his family, for his own health. And that is what you're hoping out of all of this, and a silly basketball game, or who's going to be the coach of the Kansas basketball team. Like, those sort of things, those can get figured out later. We're going to talk a little bit about them because that's what we do here on the show. But that is obviously the most important thing. Is Bill Self healthy for him and his family? So let's kind of switch gears and get to some of that stuff. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. So again, Bill Self, hospitalized concerning symptoms was the exact quote that was given by Kansas Athletics. And obviously that can be a lot of different things, right? And obviously it was concerning enough to get a couple stints in there. So a good thing that everything was done in kind of an orderly and timely manner here. So, I mean, from a health perspective, obviously this is a huge deal. If we're talking about impact on the basketball season, which, as I said earlier, obviously pales in comparison to his health for him and his family. But this could be something that has, no impact on the season, on however long the rest of his coaching career is, ranging to the extreme of having a severe impact that very much handicaps the rest of Bill Self's coaching career in terms of limiting the amount of years or games coached that there could possibly be. And like I said earlier, part of what makes this difficult is you don't exactly know what the stints are for. You can assume one thing, you can assume something else, but like there are different severities to, what this could be. The lower range of severity is that he's back on the sideline, ready to go for the start of the season. It has no impact. The other end of severities is that and I hate to even bring this up because this is the worst case scenario, right? Is there has to be at least a non-zero chance, could be 0.01%. I don't know, that Bill Self has already coached his last game on the sidelines of Kansas. Again, I think that's an unlikely scenario. That's not one that I'm pointing to, though. I have no idea. I'm not looking at the, medical charts, and nor would I know what I was looking at if I was. But I think the natural question here would be, does this increase the likelihood of early retirement, so to speak, for Bill Self? There was already some scuttlebutt, the right term, I don't know, people discussing, could this upcoming season be Bill Self's last year at Kansas? And I have no idea if there was truth to that or what. I also kind of was someone who you could convince either way, that if you told me he had so much fun coaching Darren Peterson, he's like, I'm going to come back for another year after that, versus maybe, I don't know, do you see it as a send-off year? I have no idea. Now, if it was a plan to be this is going to be my last season, does it speed up that timeline, or does it cement it? Does it guarantee that that's going to be the situation? I just can't help but think, you go back to the 2023 situation, and obviously if this is heart related, obviously the 2023 one was, we'll see what this one is, but it's hard for me not to think about the stresses that a college basketball, any college coach undergoes, just in general, but especially in today's day and age of everything going on, because it's not a situation anymore where, okay, well, I'm going to go take a month off trip during the off season. There is no off season anymore. There's constantly, you're working on, the transfer portal. You're working on high school recruiting. You're working on NIL. You're working on raising funds for your NIL for your current players and your future players. You're working on, oh no, this player just came into my locker room and is now asking for, $100,000 more because they think they're better than this other player on the team. And they ended up, talking it out and figuring out that, hey, he's making more than I am, and I want to be making as much, if not more, than he is. There's so much more you have to deal with from a stress level. And then think about the standpoint of recruiting now, where it used to be about maybe this or that. And now it maybe is a bit more about the dollars and cents, to where the back and forths with agents, the ups and downs of recruiting, the, hey, they're going to come and then they don't, the situations of feeling like you got fished a little bit, that's going to happen more often in the current structure. And that is very, very stressful. So you wonder if it does speed things up. Because you can just think it's an every day of the year job now, and it's very stressful each and every probably one of those days. Now, even if this is more of a minor thing, like I said, where he is back coaching the first game of the season and it doesn't have an impact there, it has to at least get you thinking as an individual, hey, this is starting to happen more often now. It at least makes you look in the mirror a little to be okay, how long do I want to do this? How long do I have in me? It starts to become more of a question. And it's would I be better off just not having these stresses and going, living on a beach somewhere and just fishing, and I can watch the occasional college basketball game if I really want to, So it'll be very, very interesting, right? And so I don't know what the impact is. Certainly this doesn't lengthen the time that you would think he's going to be a head coach. I should also mention, though, I do remember Coach K went through all sorts of medical stuff over the course of the back, I don't know what, like decade, 15 years of his coaching career at Duke. And he still was bouncing through that stuff, and then he'd find his way back on the sideline. So there is no guarantee that this has an impact at all. Like maybe it just revitalizes, I guess, Bill Self to where he's like, he misses not being out there when he doesn't have the opportunity to do so. But obviously it is a very scary situation, and it is one, certainly it's a good news and a good thing for Kansas that Jacque Vaughn wound up signing on the dotted line. Let's get to that next. Today's bonus episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And with FanDuel, summer sports are in full swing. And whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started today with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks again for joining us on this bonus episode. Again, it feels a little tender to discuss some of this stuff, but it's like I don't know what to do with this. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, so if he does miss any time, Bill Self, that is, if he does miss any time, and even if that's the first few games of the season, Norm Roberts, who was the guy who took over for Bill Self in 2023, he's no longer on staff, obviously, right? He retired. So who becomes that guy? I think the automatic answer to me would be Jacque Vaughn. Now, you could say if you're going with seniority, the guy who's been on the staff the most, Curtis Townsend would be that guy. But to me, it just makes sense to be Jacque Vaughn in that situation, right? He's a former head coach of an NBA team. And from a perspective of life after Bill Self, like when Bill Self does retire, who is going to be your head coach? You have a bit of an opportunity if that does happen. And again, you don't want it to happen, but if that does happen where he has to miss some games and somebody else has to coach, it gives you a bit of an auditioning period for what Jacque Vaughn can bring to the table, right? I mean, it's not the be all end all. We've seen interim coaches come in like Rodney Terry at Texas, take over a talented roster and go to the Elite Eight. And since then they haven't, lived up to the talent level that Texas can bring in and does bring in on kind of a year-to-year basis. But it would be a good opportunity to, give you at least more of a sample size of if Jacque Vaughn is a future candidate to be the head coach at Kansas. Okay, now it's not just assuming, hey, he was an assistant here in addition to his NBA stuff. Now you'd also have a little bit more game data to kind of pull off of and go off of. And it's a really good thing that KU has him because not many other schools would be in a position where it's like, oh no, our head coach might be in a situation. Again, maybe it's nothing. Maybe Bill Self's back on the sideline as soon as possible and it's not a big deal. But in the circumstance, in the worst case scenario where Bill Self can't coach, not many other schools have the luxury of saying, hey, the guy we're going to name our interim head coach, the guy who is one of our top assistants, was a former head coach at the NBA level, right? And you also have Chase Buford, who was a head coach at the G League level and the NBL, the league in Australia, where both those guys were, or in the case of Buford, like he was an award-winning head coach at his previous stops. Not a lot of other schools necessarily have that luxury that Kansas would have, and certainly it adds to the intrigue of like the Jacque Vaughn hire and what could possibly come of it. And it obviously makes you think a little bit more about the succession plan post Bill Self, and it makes you think more about, Jacque Vaughn and stuff, and whether this is something that we just look back on in 5 years and Bill Self's still the coach of Kansas and we go, man, that was cool that he moved past that and was able to get over that, or if it's something that we're looking at the end of the year and Bill Self retires and we're like, yeah, I get it. And, and now at least we've had a little bit of those conversations, kind of, what would be next and what it means for kind of the future and the now of Kansas basketball. But again, let me reiterate, like obviously the most important part here isn't the basketball. It's Bill Self's health for him, for his family. And you hope that he's doing all right. And prayers up to Bill Self and his family coming out of this awful news. All right, that'll do it for this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. See you next time with LOJ.